Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. This is episode 16. I'm Roman Zelchenko, your host. I'm an immigration lawyer turned immigration tech startup founder and an entrepreneur in the immigration space. And I'm super excited to have my guest today, Orane Cole, who is the CEO of a Canadian immigration tech company called CaseEasy. So CaseEasy is a case management platform for immigration lawyers and consultants in Canada specifically. And it's really exciting because right now, it's October 2020. Right now, there's a lot happening in the world, but Canadian immigration is really seeing some pretty good news, at least coming from the U.S. perspective. So it's really cool to see and talk to somebody from the Canadian side to hear his perspective on growth in Canada within immigration and sort of how technology is supporting that growth. So thank you so much, Orane, for joining today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Roman. And welcome to Canada.
Yeah, I know. Of course you have to say that because you're so darn nice. I'm excited for this conversation because, on the US side right now, immigration, as part of this sort of upcoming presidential election is kind of a big deal. It's a topic in so many different ways. And in a sense, it's become a lot more challenging over the past handful of years, especially because of COVID, right? COVID just depleted travel, borders closed, et cetera. And obviously borders closed in Canada, but I think, Canada had aggressive immigration goals to keep up with, demand for new people, for aging population. Just you need more people, right, in Canada in a sense. And it's been really cool to see Trudeau just kind of say, okay, we're in COVID, et cetera, but let's keep going with immigration. Are you kind of feeling that at all?
Yeah. So when we just experienced the lockdowns, for sure, we had some impact with our immigration lawyers on the platform. Some persons, they tend to panic, right? To say, okay, I can't manage the practice anymore. I have to wait and so on. But shortly after, I did see an uptick. Persons regained their confidence and started signing up for subscriptions. And surprisingly, this time of year, I'm seeing a lot more persons coming on and starting their businesses. So I believe it was just a short-term panic. But so far, I'm really seeing an uptick of persons actually regaining confidence and getting a lot more clients on.
Which is great. And that also means that there are clients coming in. That means there are companies hiring, right? And
students, a lot of students still coming in, and our borders, they tend to let in some persons know. So it's not as closed off as the US. So I know a lot of students are coming in. A lot of persons within Canada, they're actually submitting their applications for permanent residency and so on. So we are seeing some uptake with that.
That's really exciting. That's so cool. And we're going to get to sort of what CaseEasy is doing for the industry right now and sort of where you're at. I want to just say to everybody who's watching, shout yourself out. Tell us where you're from. Orane's coming in from Canada. So if you're from Canada, for sure, just say what's up and maybe tell me what province you're in. I know in America, we have states. You guys have provinces. A lot of times Americans are like, what state are you from? They're provinces. So let us know in the comments. I'm already, Ken Nicolane says, hey guys, looking forward to this. I know you are, I know you're up in the beautiful Canadian Rockies. And Thomas Koshi says, welcome. So thank you, Thomas. So Orane, tell me, I think your story is really cool because I'm coming from the perspective of I was an immigration lawyer and then I became, I sort of saw a need and I decided to start an immigration tech company. This was based on my experience as a practitioner, as a provider.
Right.
You come from the different side of things. You are a technology expert. You are an IT guru, if you will. But before even that, you're originally from Jamaica, right? And you did go to undergrad in Jamaica, right?
Yes, I did.
So can you talk a little bit about that? I guess I've never personally been to Jamaica. I don't know. Can you share a little bit about what it was like kind of growing up there? Why did you decide to go into technology? And I don't know, what was it like? What was university like for you?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first things first, if you haven't been to Jamaica, please put that on your bucket list. It's a beautiful place. I take my vacations in Jamaica, and I grew up there, right? So it's beautiful. So I did do the undergrad studies, but it all began, I think, even before that, right? So I remember at around age 9, thereabout, my parents, they invested in a computer, right? And back then it was Windows 95. I'm not sure if you had access to that. So Windows 95. Back then we had dial-up internet, we had floppy disk, but it was a very unique experience, right? At age 9, living in a third world country, having access to a computer, that was unheard of, right? To have access to a computer in Jamaica back then, you literally would have to probably book an appointment with a university, or you'd have to check into a local library, right? So that's when I actually got my first taste of computing and technology. One of the things that got me started is that my parents, they have never invested in video games, right? They don't believe in it. They believe in academia. And myself and all my siblings, we all went to university. So they didn't buy me video games. But the second I got the computer, guess what I did? I loaded games, right? That was the first thing. 9-year-old kid, right? So I loaded the games and I started using the computer, and I realized that the computer had its own language, right? I could write special commands and it could understand me. And just being a curious kid, that's when I started doing a lot more research and start playing with the computer a bit more, and really just reverse engineering how it worked. And that's where it began. So fast forward a few years later, naturally I would have enrolled into undergrad. So I did go to college first before going into university. During my college studies, I actually studied electronics and computing. So that gave me an inside look as to how the computers actually worked, right? So I'd look at the circuit boards, we'd actually build our own circuit boards at some point. And that actually got me involved with the hardware side of things. I did that for about 2 years. And then afterward, getting that hardware experience, I transitioned into university, where I did my studies in enterprise computing, where I learned the different programming languages. And that's when I actually ventured into software development.
When you, I love the stories that are like, this is what you were meant to do since childhood. To me, that's so cool, because it just means that this is truly an inherent interest, right? It's
Right.
not like, oh, who pays the most money, software engineer. No, you were like, I want to write code because I want to figure out how to play with this thing, with this computer. I also had a computer. Oddly enough, when I was growing up, we had a computer as well. For some reason, it was in my room. I don't know why.
You're lucky.
Yeah, I know. So, and we had America Online, so that was like our version.
Yeah.
And I remember receiving CDs, like computer game CDs in the mail, the free trial, and or something like that. It was really fun. That's so cool. Just to clarify, so when you say that you first went to college, and because I know that the verbiage is different in sort of in different places, is that sort of like high school, or was it sort of like pre-university?
It's pre-university.
Got it.
Yeah, pre-university.
And how long was that for?
That was an associate degree, so that was 2 years.
Got it. And then you went to university for 4 or for 2 more to get the bachelor?
Well, 4 years, because it was an unrelated program, so I couldn't transfer any other credits.
Got it.
It actually took 5 years because I did it part-time while I was working.
Wow.
So I paid for tuition and everything else. But so it ended up being 5 years for a focused track on software development.
And what kind of job did you have while you were doing university part-time?
Well, I worked at the bank. So early on, I got this bank job, and back then, any job, you just wanted to get a job, right? So I got a job at Scotiabank. I was a bank teller for about 3 years. Then I went into personal banking, where I did a bit of customer service and everything else. And looking back now, I believe that actually gave me an edge in terms of when I look back at the role of a teller and customer service, because Scotiabank, they're so focused on being customer centric, right? They invested a lot to ensure that we were equipped to deal with customer queries and everything else. So I even recall a time when they sent us off to a boot camp, like a 3-5 day boot camp, where all we discussed were customer, how to improve the customer experience, and we did role playing and everything else, and it was all focused on customer, being customer centric, right? And I believe that laid the foundation. So I was in banking for a little bit, and that's where I wrote a lot of letters, and all of those skill sets. I realized that those were actually foundational skills that's helping me today.
That's so cool. I always felt that way about retail. I worked in retail during in college, I guess at the end of high school and in college, university. And yeah, same thing. I had to greet people regardless of what they said to me. I had to smile. I had to help them. And that sort of builds up the kind of momentum of being customer centric, I guess, as you said. So
it's a very useful skill, especially as because most software engineers, they go straight into software engineering. They bypass the whole customer centeredness. They haven't spoken to a one-on-one or dealing with customer queries. So it's a unique skill set that I believe most software engineers don't have the opportunity to gain. So I found that very useful.
For sure. So you're getting this experience, is really valuable experience at the bank. You're in college, and then you eventually then went to university. You studied, graduated. Is that when you decided to move to the US, or what happened after you kind of graduated with this degree?
Right. So after I graduated from, well, not to the US, you said to the US, so Canada.
Sorry, to Canada.
Right. So after I graduated from the university, I actually got a job from banking. I left banking and I went into IT, because that's when I actually got the degree, so I could actually practice and build systems. So I worked at this large insurance company in their IT department. It's called Sagicor. It's one of the Caribbean's largest insurance companies, and that's where I actually got to build enterprise systems that impacted other banking platforms, insurance platforms, and I got the experience there. So shortly after that, I decided I actually would want to transition from software engineering to cybersecurity, because that was a buzz back then. It was around 2014, thereabout. So that was the buzz then. Everybody was talking about hacks in the media, and I wanted to see, okay, how can I create an impact in this industry, right? And that's when I decided, you know what, let me look for universities in Canada and see how best I can get there.
What made you decide on Canada at that time?
Okay, so, well, I ruled out the US. For some reason, I ruled out the US because back then, with 9/11 and everything else that was happening, it just didn't seem like the right place to be, right? And when I looked at Canada, even though I didn't have anyone here and I would be coming to a country that I didn't have any experience, it just seemed as if it was a good transition from Jamaica to Canada. Right. So it was just that I ruled out the US, and it was either the US or Canada. So I just decided, let me go ahead with Canada.
For sure. So then you applied for university, or for a study permit, right, for Canada. And then you went to, where did you go? Where did you end up going?
Well, they changed the name, but it's now called Ontario Tech University.
Okay. So what was your
Oshawa?
In Ottawa. What was your experience like? What was the move like? What was immigration experience like going from Jamaica to Canada? Can you talk a little bit about what you remember from that time?
Yeah. So first things first, the move to Canada was actually pre-planned 5 years in advance, right? Because I usually plan, I do 5-year plans as to career and life and everything else, what that would look like. So when I did that 5-year plan, I realized that within 5 years, I'd have to leave the company that I'm at, and I'd have to transition to just for growth opportunities, right? Well, in doing the experience, I did everything myself in terms of researching the university, applying for immigration, but it was so much reading, right? I literally felt as if I was going for a law degree, but I had to read and interpret a lot of things. And it was a tedious process, right? But that process wasn't too difficult. So I did everything online and got everything submitted and got approved to the university. It was the only university that I applied to because I ruled out all the others. And the course that they offered, it was really hands-on. So I applied to that one and I got through. And then I submitted the immigration application. And then, yeah, I came to Canada. So it was nerve-wracking because you're leaving everything behind, family, friends, everything. But at the same time, it was very exciting because I knew that, well, I have this principle that if it causes discomfort, it's an opportunity for growth, right? So I felt uncomfortable about the move. So I knew that it would have been an opportunity for growth. And I just dived in and just did what I had to do.
That's amazing. That's so inspiring because it is hard to leave. It is hard to leave family behind, friends behind, comfort of a place, a physical place that you know. You left a warm climate for a much colder climate, right? So even that's a change, right? It's a sort of a difference. Cool. So right. So you arrived. You're in Canada. You're getting your master's degree. You finish up the master's degree and you start to work in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah.
Right? What was? Can you talk a little bit about that? And sort of, I know you ended up kind of being a lecturer as well at the university.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that somehow ended up this comfortable. I mean, this is what you came to Canada for. I mean, you wanted to do cybersecurity. This whole, it's a big and it's a growing field, and then you make this crazy big life change and pivot. So, what was it like working? You finally doing the thing you wanted to do, and sort of, do you remember that moment of why you made that change and why you decided to pivot your career?
Yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday. Right. So I did started doing cybersecurity consulting with a friend of mine. He ran a cybersecurity and privacy company. So he would get some big government contracts. I'd help with them and do, we did primarily like threat and risk assessments and securing data assets and everything else for corporations. So I did that for a bit. Shortly after I completed the master's, the university called me back to lecture a course. So I was doing both. I was doing the lecturing during the day, and with whatever time I had, I was doing the cybersecurity consulting, right? Shortly after that, I would have become qualified to then apply for permanent residency. So permanent residency, I think in US it's called like a green card.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I would have been qualified to at least apply. And that's when I began doing research and saying, okay, what's the next step? How do I become a permanent residency, a permanent resident, and transition from a student? So that's when I started doing the research and said, okay, you know what? Let me see if I can call some folks and get some help with this. So I called a friend of mine, and she said to me, you know what? Based on your questions, you probably need to speak with an immigration consultant. So I was like, immigration consultant, what is that? I had no idea what an immigration consultant was or if that was a thing, right? So I got this contact for an immigration consultant, and I called them up. They sent me everything via email. They scheduled the appointment, and everything was manual. So I looked, they gave me Excel spreadsheets. They requested sensitive documents via email. And listen, I'm a cybersecurity expert. So when I'm sending sensitive documents, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm sending these documents via email. This is crazy. So I realized that everything was manual, and I waited until the entire process was complete. And then I said, you know what, this seems to be a problem because this is my experience. I felt all this friction, and I had to be doing all these things manually, Excel spreadsheets, sending things in an unsecure way. And I said, there had to be a better way. And I drafted an email. I said, okay, if you had A, B, C, D, and if it did this for you, would you pay for it? And the consultant, she said, absolutely. When can I start? And I said, okay, it's not yet built. Just give me a few months. And that's where it began. That's where I got the idea. And I did that for a bit before I transitioned to it full time. And I left the role as a lecturer and the cybersecurity consultant and just focused on it.
That's so amazing, because if I took a step back and I looked at your career up until that point, you had an undergraduate degree, in computer science or systems engineering, right? You had a graduate degree in cybersecurity. Basically, you were working in the cybersecurity space and already lecturing. I mean, to me, that is the pathway to like crazy success. It's like, I mean, that's what everyone wants to do.
Right.
And so, it's so crazy to think that you were so moved by this idea, right? And this kind of realization. So you told this consultant, hey, what if it was better? Essentially, you probably painted an amazing picture of what if this was all automated. And the consultant said that would be amazing. Now, did you work with this consultant specifically to sort of map out the beginnings of what would eventually become CaseEasy, or did you kind of just look back at your own experience and then only reconnect with the consultant once you had something built?
Well, Art, so this is what happened. So after I sent that email and I told them, you know what, it's not built yet, but I can build it. Would you want to participate? They pretty much said, oh, they don't have the time. So I'm like, oh my goodness, where am I going to get this domain expertise? So what I did, I started to do my research. There are a lot of online material in terms of when you're studying to become an immigration consultant, they have a lot of resources online. So I read through them and I reverse engineered the entire process. And I just did the first iteration. And funny enough, I called another friend and I was just telling them about a few things. And then she responding and say, you know what, Orane, I'm going to need a system soon. I just got my immigration consultant license. And I'm like, what? You got your license? I'm like, I'm building a system. And then she said, wow, that's coincidental. So she became my first client, right? I said, okay, so this is good. So she actually gave me the domain knowledge that I needed and became the first client. And that's where it all began.
Was the company, when you first launched it, was it called CaseEasy or was it something else?
I brainstormed the name for probably a week or two, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this isn't working. I just gave it a name. Back then it was called Canada Consult Portal, and we rebranded January of this year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, Canada Consult Portal is very clear. I know what you do.
Right. Yeah. And it's niche. It's specific to Canada, and it has consulting there and so on. So we went to CaseEasy. It's more inclusive. A lot more lawyers are attracted to the platform now, and the branding, I think, is a lot better. So it was a good transition.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's always interesting. So you had this essentially initial client who kind of partnered with you from the domain expertise perspective, and you worked together. When did you launch initially?
June 2017.
Oh, okay. And you launched essentially with this one client, right?
Yeah.
Did you go back then to once you were launched and live, did you go back to your initial, like your consultant and say, hey, here it is? I
did, but I didn't sign up for some reason. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Look, the person that got you inspired to do this.
I tell you, it's amazing. I have no idea, but they inspired it. And the thing is, the problem was so compelling. I literally had to drop everything that I was doing, and my brain is wired to solve problems. So I just had to drop everything that I was doing and focus on it because I know I could add value to this space.
Wow, that's fascinating. Are they still not one of your clients?
No.
Well, if you're watching right now,
you better.
I want to just pause here for a second and just to give a few folks a shout out. So Thomas Koshi says, I'm in Atlanta. Janet Turner, can't see your photo, but hi from Central Florida. And we have Shiv from Atlanta. Hi, Shiv. And then we have Akuth or Achuth say, how's it going? What a coincidence.
Oh,
recently. So small world. So thank you all. And by the way, if you have questions as we go, questions for Orane, questions for myself, comments about anything we're saying, drop in the comments. We'll shout them out. We can talk about them as well. So yeah, crazy. So you're now live. You've got basically your first customer, which was a built-in customer. Incredible. I mean, I think a lot of people would love to have that opportunity. How did you get your second customer? I guess your first, I don't want to say real customer, but the first customer you had to approach with a product rather than with this sort of domain partnership thing. How did that happen? And sort of how did you get the ball rolling? And I want to ask that question because I think, now in this industry, it's growing, it's booming in Canada, in the US, around the world. But the big question is always going to be, how do I make this business grow? How do I get my clients? So how did that work for you?
Yeah, so the first thing I had to do, I needed to find out who my ideal customer was. And then I created a list of those persons. So I knew in terms of the demographic, and then I researched their websites and got their contact details. And I sent out emails every day. Here's a system. This is what it does. These are the benefits. LinkedIn was great to do prospecting as well. One of the things that actually helped us tremendously was actual trade shows, conferences. So you have these conferences like the ALA in Canada. We do have similar conferences here. So that was one of the first things that I got involved with, was to just become part of the conference, be a sponsor, and get the name out there, because you can have one of the best products, and if nobody knows about it, then it's just the best product that nobody knows about. So I did everything that was humanly possible to get the name out there.
Well, and did people come up to you? Like, did they come up to the booth and say, wow, what is this? Can I learn more? Was it successful? Were the conference?
Oh yeah. I think we made the other booths envious, because persons were like crowded and said, wow. And put it this way, there's only one other provider in Canada. Well, at that time was only one other provider, and they haven't innovated in probably over a decade. Mm-hmm. So when persons actually see a platform that's getting new features and it's growing rapidly, it's almost as if we came with something brand new and innovative. So persons were really interested as to what we were doing. And when we go to trade shows or conferences, hundreds of leads coming in. So we did see a lot of traction going to these conferences.
That's really exciting. Did you have anybody with you, like at the booth? Did you have multiple people? Was it just you?
Just myself.
Wow. That's
I talk about this all the time. Persons say, what does CEO mean? I say, okay, it's Chief Everything Officer, right? Mm-hmm. So I literally have to be doing everything. So yeah.
That must be so tiring, because you have to just field questions and talk to people all day.
Well, when you're energized by it, it's you hardly feel it. You feel it probably after the conference is done, and you're like, oh, right? But during the conference, you're just high energy.
Yeah, for sure. So this was around 2017 that you launched. So I'm assuming you were doing something. You started probably going to conferences as early as you could.
Yeah.
What can you go a little bit into kind of what CaseEasy does? Because there are different types of technology solutions within the immigration space. Uh-huh. And so I guess, maybe for folks to kind of understand who your target market is, like who do you support, and sort of what kind of service do you provide?
Yeah, sure. So we help immigration practitioners automate their practice, right? So we automate the full spectrum of work, right? So from compliance to accounting, invoice generation, client communication, document management, notes management, task management. So it's really an all-in-one product. And one of the reasons why I decided to build it like this, I realized that the average immigration practitioner, they use 3, 4, 5 products to manage their practice, right? So we wanted to build a single solution that persons could just sign in and get things done in the most efficient way. So I joke about this all the time. If we split up all the features that we have, we could have probably 10, 15 different product lines that we could launch. But we're creating a real ecosystem of products that can help immigration practitioners run their practices efficiently.
And so it's solely Canadian immigration, right? In terms of the forums.
Yeah, the focus right now is Canada. And the reason for that is I want to ensure that I build the best product for Canada first before I focus on anything else. And focus is super important at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now, and like we were saying kind of earlier on in the beginning, Canadian immigration it feels like it's booming.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so it makes sense for there to be more, solutions, and especially from a technological standpoint, especially because now there are a lot more practitioners working from home. Yeah. So there's just you need something that will allow you to be digital, it'll allow your practice to be digital, whether you're a solo or you have a whole team behind you. And so I don't know, can you talk a little bit about maybe the growth so far and kind of what are the things that you're thinking are a priority, maybe what your clients are seeing as a priority, because there are so many different ways you can probably go in terms of building out any platform. So I'm just kind of curious, especially as the Canadian immigration market gets bigger. I'm curious to hear kind of what your thoughts are on how CaseEasy has tracked that growth, or how you want to track that growth, sort of how does that look for you?
Okay, so growth has been good in terms of persons who have discovered our product over time. I think it was either yesterday or the day before, we had our 1,000th install, right? So for each person that signs up, a database instance is created. So we had our 1,000th database instance. So that blew my mind, like, wow, we are there already. Right, so we're definitely seeing that level of growth and uptake in terms of persons wanting to adapt an online platform. We're actually going. So Canada's immigration and landscape, it's just as complex as the United States, right? So I believe that we have about 80 to 100 different immigration streams, and each of those would have different nuanced requirements. So what I'm seeing a lot of different firms coming on, and they want very specific customizations to their firms. And just thinking about it based on the combinations, it's almost impossible to satisfy all those needs. So what I have decided to focus on over the last few months, we're building the tools that help to build the tools. Right. So what that means, Elon Musk is doing something similar with his Gigafactory. He's working on the robots that actually helps to build the vehicles. Right. So we're building actual tools that we can then give these tools to the immigration practitioners and say, okay, you want to build something, you can actually build your own custom solution and then plug that into our backend. So I'm focusing a lot of my energy on the tools, because I see that's where we're going to actually be able to grow exponentially, by giving that, empowering our end users with the tools themselves to help them to build their own customizations in the platform.
Is it kind of like is it kind of giving users the ability to customize their own user experience, the interface, or the different modules that they have?
The different modules, the interfaces, forms. So for instance, if you want, you have a very specific firm and you want to add different questions or different question types, you should be able to do that. Right now, it takes us a bit of time to do that in the back end, because we have to go through the codes, have to recompile. But we want to make you, to empower you to do that in real time, so you can create your own custom fields and build out your own forms and get that data in as quick as possible.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's great, because to your point, I mean, I see it in the same way on the US side. Every immigration law firm, even if they do the same type of work, their workflow is a little bit different. The questions they ask, like the little nuances. And I think empowering law firms to be able to work with their nuances rather than change their practice to fit your technology is a really powerful, first of all, it's a powerful selling point for them. Yep. But I think it's also a powerful experience, right? It's a really positive experience.
Yeah. So I'm just focused primarily now on the foundational stuff. So get the foundation right, and then we can grow the product as much as we want afterwards.
Absolutely. It's almost never ending, like the growth from that perspective.
Yeah.
We have a sort of a question here from Ken. It's big, so I'll hide it in a second. When it fits the discussion, trying to understand where you're going in terms of assessments, what programs are you going to push deeper into PNPs, et cetera. So I know, PNPs, provincial nominee programs, right? That is sort of the state or province-based kind of immigration program that you have that's layered on top of the federal system. We don't have this in the U.S. In the U.S., it's all federal. I think there has been a push to have, some regional immigration availabilities, because what the Midwest in the U.S. needs is very different from what the coast regions need. Right. So Canada has that. I don't know. What are your thoughts about sort of CaseEasy working with all these different types of programs?
Right. So it ties back into what I was just talking about in terms of the tools that help to build the tools.
Mm-hmm.
So given that we have all these different PNP programs, we first have to build get the form builder tools out so you can actually build your own PNP assessment forms, right? So to answer your question, Ken, that's what's coming next. We're building a form builder tool where we can have these PNP assessments done in a few minutes, rather than you having to wait a week or 2 weeks for us to customize on your behalf. So it's just building out those tools and then empowering the immigration community to be able to make those customizations on their own.
So in a sense, it's like if the Canadian government rolls out a new program, unless it's wildly different, in a sense, you probably would be flexible enough to just be able to manage that as well.
Right.
We've got just a little shout out here saying shout out to the UI of CaseEasy. The other software felt like I was using Windows 96. Was there a Windows 96 or was it just 95 into 2000? I forget.
It's 9X, I guess. 95 point something.
Yeah. And then Ken says it's more like DOS. You know. We've got another shout out for you here, Orane. So that's great. Where do you think, what are you seeing in the Canadian immigration space in terms of practitioners? So are you seeing like an increase in people actually doing the work? Because, I'm thinking about it from, your perspective as you're the technology side. You obviously need the practitioners as clients. And then there's the back end of it, which is the government saying we're doubling down on our immigration goals. We're going to hit the 300,000+ new immigrants a year. And that's, I think, that's permanent residence, if I'm not mistaken. So probably when you,
yep.
Right. So when you tack onto that temporary work visas, you tack onto that study permits, et cetera, you're going to have a ton of people coming in. Do you see more people coming into the practice, whether consultants or lawyers?
Yeah, that trend will continue because the immigration landscape, it's so complicated. It's very difficult for someone from India to go on the government side to interpret all those clauses and to submit the right documents. And for you to make a mistake in immigration, it's very costly. It's going to cost you either time or money. And persons don't have that. So it's best to align yourself with an expert, right? In most industries, we don't do things ourselves. We rely on experts. So I would say definitely in the years to come, a lot more immigration practitioners are coming on and helping based on the volume of immigrants that's coming in.
How do you feel then about some of these kind of, the kind of TurboTax for immigration platforms? Because it's there's room for both. That's my opinion. There's room for both in the market. There are always, like, think about it for you. When you came here on a study permit, if there was like a DIY, Canadian immigration platform, you probably would have used that because you did do it yourself. Right. But of course, once it came time for permanent residency, you realized, okay, maybe that's a little bit more complicated, or I don't have the time I had before to do it myself. So I would rather work with an expert, whatever there might be. So just curious to hear your thoughts as somebody who's obviously very much in the space, but you're more so supporting the practitioners. How do you feel about that other side of it?
Well, there's definitely room for automation and AI to help immigrants to navigate the immigration landscape. That's definitely there, but that's just a fraction of the market. You'll have a lot more complicated immigration matters that you definitely need to have a discussion to determine even what immigration program you should be looking at applying to, right? And there's always going to be room for automation and for having that live assistance and getting that expert oversight. So I believe it's about preference at this point. And because the immigration landscape is so complicated, I don't see any system right now being able to have 100% coverage of all the different complications in the immigration system. So there'll always be both.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. It's just interesting because you hear sometimes people say that one is going to take over the other, and there's a lot of tension, I feel, across immigration, the immigration technology spectrum, I guess.
Right.
And so I just always kind of find it interesting to dive into that because to your point, I think there is absolutely room for everyone. In a sense, there is this, it's kind of, I mean, not to use this analogy, but it's like we have a number of how many COVID cases there are right now, only based on how many tests we can administer.
Correct.
Essentially, only based on how much technology we have to test everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bad parallel, but it's a very current parallel for me of like, there are definitely way more immigration cases right now that aren't seeing any kind of platform because either the platform doesn't exist or they don't know about it. And so the market is actually growing as I think tech grows because it gives more people an opportunity to support themselves and actually file for their work permit or file for their permanent residency or whatever it might be. Whereas before they might have given up, right? Because they didn't have the money, they didn't understand how to do it, et cetera. We've got a question here. How it's been categorized based on the wide stream of engineering skills to the requirement of the Canadian market acquisition. I think the question here is a little bit about immigrants, I suppose, coming into Canada. I'm not sure I understand this question.
Right, and we're not focused on the immigrant side of things.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction to make, right? That you provide support to the immigration attorneys and consultants.
Correct.
And so if an individual is interested in coming to Canada and understanding their immigration options, they can come to you and maybe you can refer them to somebody, but you're not the one who's doing that actual work.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, Ken here had a note saying the next RCIC, which is the kind of registered Canadian immigration consultant, right? Did I get that right?
Yep.
Nice. Has over 800 people writing it in November. So I guess that this is a lot. And if they have 4 annually, that's a good number of people. And so, of course, every immigration consultant can start their own practice, I assume, or can join a firm, et cetera. So definitely the space is booming. So what do you see about the future of the company? I mean, one thing we mentioned, okay, right now you focus on Canadian immigration. I don't know, do you see yourself moving into other parts of the world? Do you see yourself moving outside of immigration? Sort of, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so, well, I believe I'm a first principles guy. So I believe just doing first things first, which is ensuring that I solve the problem well for the Canadian immigration community. Once that's done and everybody says, yes, Orane, you've done a terrific job and there's nothing more to do in Canada, then I may look at other industries that I can add value to. But it's all about the problem that's being solved, right? So I don't just look to industries, I look for problems, right? And if it's something that I believe I can add value to, and if it's a meaningful enough problem, then definitely I would look at solving for that. But for the next foreseeable future, next 3-4 years, it's definitely Canadian immigration that's going to be our top focus.
That's good to know, and I'm sure that makes Canadian immigration lawyers and consultants feel good because it's like, okay, you're in it for the long haul. So fine. So in terms of CaseEasy, what are your thoughts in general about the global immigration tech market? Because I mean, I know last week I had the founder of a German immigration tech company, and that was really interesting, right? It was like is inbound into Germany, and so I'm realizing, and I think we've all realized this, that every country obviously has their own immigration laws and processes. There is the opportunity to have technology across at least, let's say, the top 50, let's say by number, right? There has to be an economies of scale. You're not going to build technology for something that is very, very low in terms of volume. But I don't know, what do you think about the sort of broader global market of immigration tech, whether the DIY side or kind of the case management side?
Yeah. Well, one thing I've realized for sure is that all immigration streams, they seem to be complicated regardless of the jurisdiction, right? So there's always going to be an opportunity to disrupt the industry and to bring new technologies to help to streamline the processes. Yeah, but for some reason it's complex. So I don't see that going anywhere soon in terms of the technologies that are being deployed. As to where it's going next, given this whole lockdowns and everything else and everybody moving virtual, I don't know. I really have no idea where it's going to end up. But if it does get back on stream and a lot more borders begin to open, it's just going to continue to grow. A lot more persons are going to get in the space of deploying that technology, whether it's the do-it-yourself stream or it's building the backend tools to support immigration practitioners. That's just going to continue to grow as time progresses.
Do you think it would be an opportune time right now to sort of overhaul the global immigration program? I mean, in a sense, there's relatively very low volume of people moving around the world. You know, if it was me, obviously every country has their own governments and things like that. But if it was me, it's like, all right, everybody, we're very low on numbers. Let's all gather and talk about, can we do something to streamline global movement?
It's a discussion to have. I'm not sure how feasible it's going to be, though, to get all that cooperation and getting everybody to agree to something like that. But each jurisdiction, they have so much complications within their processes alone. It's going to really take someone on the ground that understands the whole immigration system and can be there and work with government officials to help to streamline some of the processes.
Yeah, for sure. And then, you know, you see treaties and things like that, where at least some countries come together and say, okay, let's make it really easy to travel between the two of us.
Right.
What, you know, it sounds like, from just hearing from your story, it almost sounds like you jumped from success to success. And I know there are a lot, you know, you're the chief everything officer. So I know that in between the successes are long nights. They are really tiring conferences. You know, it's the you know, the debugging and the taking client calls. What are, you know, did you have any bumps in the road? I mean, and if you didn't, maybe not. Maybe that's just, it's a lot of hard work and a lot of wins. But I don't know, did you have any memorable sort of bumps in the road where you either thought, I don't know what's going to happen, what am I doing, etc.?
Yeah. Well, for sure, there has been a lot of hurdles, right? And by the way, if there were no hurdles, then it would have been too easy and I probably wouldn't be interested enough. Yeah, but there has been a lot from the technology side, and you start to see issues as you start to grow, and it's just to address the things as quickly as they come up. In terms of something memorable, no, I don't have. There's nothing that really stands out that I say this was a roadblock, and that I couldn't overcome. Yeah, but everything I just took it one day at a time and just solve the problems as they arose. So it's just being consistent.
Mm-hmm. You have a very Zen outlook of being a CEO. One day at a time, you tackle the problems as they come. I mean, sure. I guess it's one of the only ways to kind of stay sane, right, while you're doing this crazy entrepreneurial journey.
Well, one of the things that helps me is based on how I triage the different problems. How do you prioritize, right? Because in any given day, you have 10, 20 different things that you could be doing. So I try to systemize my decision-making as much as I can. So when I get a task, I then categorize them and say, okay, is this an urgent task? Is this an important task, but low priority? And just put them in different buckets and work on them. And I find that to work when you have systems that helps you not to think too much, but to just get things done and get things prioritized. It really helps to move things along faster.
What would you say to somebody who maybe, you know, whether in the Canadian immigration space or anywhere in the world, is thinking, hey, I'm seeing a problem in the immigration process, whatever it might be.
Right.
I mean, what do you say to someone like that who might not feel the confidence right now to leave their cushy, comfortable, you know, growth trajectory job and kind of go at taking a stab at, you know, kind of building something? What would you say to somebody like that, really, which is you back in 2016, 2017?
I would say stop, think twice. It's very, very that's what I would tell them. I would tell them, listen, it's going to be an uphill battle. You should be very careful. But what I would say to that person is to ensure that you have sufficient funding, you have the subject matter expertise, And whatever time in your head that you think it's going to take, if you think it's going to take 1 year, just multiply it by 10, right? It's going to take a lot longer, and you're going to need to deploy a lot of patience in the process. So yeah, so it at this stage, it's just about your risk tolerance and your threshold to pain. So once you have those intact, then you can attempt to do it. Or the smart thing to do would probably be to find someone who's doing something similar and partner with them and see if you can add value there as well, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel.
Have you, because you mentioned funding, you've not taken any kind of institutional funding, right?
Right, fully bootstrapped, and that's by design.
Yeah. Is that something to ever consider, you think, or you don't know?
I will consider it, but one of the reasons why I've opted to bootstrap it's just something psychological to have your back against the wall and have to figure things out, right? So if I don't add value to my customers, we're not getting paid. It's that simple. When you take venture capital too early, you sometimes get comfortable. You don't discover what your business model is, and you're spending up all these VC money thinking that you're successful when you haven't really discovered what your business model is. So I'm very adamant in solving for that and figuring it out and growing the company organically. And then when we're ready to really scale, we can bring VCs on and say, okay, this is the true valuation of the company. And we have a good enough track record to attract good VCs and to reduce our dilution in the process.
Yeah, and it's kind of like at that point, you've figured out to at least some extent your business model. You have maybe a vision of the big things you need to build, and it's like, okay, I just need more resources to get this done. Whereas to your point, I guess it is, and this isn't always the case, but it can be the case where you get money up front and then you're just like, you're not really sure which direction to take it. Actually, right. And when you raise money, you do have to spend it typically by some period of time, because they want to see that so you might end up building for the sake of building because you have a time crunch. And,
I look at this, Roman. If you get VC funding and you're just building, or you're just going in a particular direction, you better be careful that you're actually going in the right direction, because you're speeding ahead at 100 miles per hour in the wrong direction. Right? When you're bootstrapped, you have a bit more time. You can process things. You can listen to your customers more, and you can be more certain that you're going in the right direction. When VCs come in, they tend to tell you a bit more what they would like to see and end up taking the company probably in the wrong direction. So I'm very adamant on executing my vision first, and then when I'm ready to scale up, I can look at outside investors.
And sort of somewhat related to one of the questions we were talking about in terms of you being the CEO, you had that technical expertise and you partnered with a Canadian immigration professional. Paula says here, excellent advice, although I'm on the opposite side. I have the subject matter but lack the technical expertise. This happens a lot. I mean, this was the boat I was in, right? I know a little bit of HTML, a little bit, but that's not going to be enough to build a platform. So I had the subject matter expertise. I spent a lot of time learning enough about technology to first be able to even translate my idea to a technical person. Right. And then, of course, I had to find a technical person. Do you think that, someone like Paulo or anybody else who has an idea coming from the SME side, but not from the technical side, what are some options you think, or some feasible ways they can go forward with trying their idea out?
Well, the first thing is to ensure you read the book Lean Startup, right? That book is going to save you a ton in terms of financing and what you focus your energies on. So the Lean Startup methodology, it actually shows you how to build products and MVPs and get it to market and test it before you actually do any type of big investment. So it is possible. You could actually find a lot of talented persons on Upwork or any of these freelancing platforms. You invest a little bit of money to get the MVP out there, and you can test your ideas before you invest in building the big solutions. So yeah, so it's definitely feasible, but it's just how you go about deploying the capital and building out that MVP and getting that validation.
Yeah, an MVP, minimum viable product, just in
Viable
case. Yeah.
product.
Yeah, definitely agree. Right. You can even kind of pay someone just to build a wireframe, to build what your thing might look like, so you could visualize it and say, I thought it might be X, but I don't love it. Or if you do love it, then you could say, all right, I'm going to put more time, money, whatever, into continuing to build it out. Yeah, definitely. Lean Startup is a great book. There's another question here from Marco Scano, who says, you're so right. When you're getting paid, you have to deliver value. And then Marco asks, what's the number one action that founders should focus on to figure out what their business model is? I think what you had said was, well, if you're taking VC money, you're not as pressured in a sense to find a business model. And it sounds like pressure is not a good thing, but it is hard to find a viable business model. There are people, not every business model makes you the money, because you have to figure out how much it costs to deliver the service.
Right.
So what's your advice on how to figure out what a business model should be, and like how founders can figure that out?
Sure. So you need a lot. You need faster feedback loops, right? So meaning, when I look at a startup is really a series of experiments. So as a founder, it's your duty to execute those experiments in the fastest possible way and to get feedback. So that's the first thing. How do you get feedback in the fastest possible way? Get your customers involved. I don't build anything these days without first hearing from my customers. So they tell me what they want, and I have to hear from 5-10 customers validating that that's what they actually want. And then we deploy resources to get it built. So just having that relationship with the customer, listening, taking feedback, and getting that feedback in as quickly as possible, I believe that's how you discover a business model. Because if you execute enough experiments in series, you will discover something that works.
Interesting. Yeah. So basically, if one client suggests something, don't necessarily jump on it right away and deploy all of your resources, because you kind of have to be judicious with where you spend your time, your energy, your money, your people.
Yeah.
That's really great advice. And probably it's hard, right? Because I imagine a client asks for something. It's, especially in the beginning, you don't want to say no. I mean, you want to say yes. You want people to be excited.
Well, guess what? I've as I mentioned earlier, I try to systemize a lot of things, right? So when persons ask for they make feature requests. Back in university, we learned an ethical framework. It's called the Utilitarian approach. And it pretty much says that, how do you create the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people, right? So that's the mindset that I have. So if you ask me for a feature request, Roman, I'm going to validate that with 10, 20 other customers, that is this something that's going to be useful? And then I'm going to get that built. But if you're just asking something specific to your practice, it may not be the best use of time because it's not going to impact a lot of users at the same time. So I have to get that validation and that upvote of the feature request before we go ahead and build.
Do you have that conversation with has that happened to you where you had to say, look, this is a great idea. Do you say to them, let me talk to a few other customers, or do you say
well, that's not what I say.
Right.
What we actually do, we take those ideas and put it into our platform, and then we track it over time. And then based on, we can get a lot more requests and say, okay, this feature request has gotten 3 requests. I guess it's something important, and then we build, right? But we take all the feedback and we put it into our system, and that helps us to organize it and determine what are the ones that we should be focused on.
Do you think that there's any room for, let's say a client says, Orane, I want something very specific. I will pay you to build it.
Well, as utilitarian approach, is it going to create the greatest good for the greatest amount of people? If the answer is no, then it's not something I could do right now. So I would turn it down, because if it's not going to be impacting a lot more persons, that money that's going to be spent and the resources that's going to go into building that one feature for this one firm, it may not create the impact that we want. And if that firm leaves a year or 2 years from now, then we're stuck with a feature that nobody else wants.
Yeah.
That's how I have to process some of these things. And that's why I'm building the tools to let them build their own customized tools.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because, I'm thinking about that question myself too. I would probably say, well, how much, right? Because to your point about being utilitarian, it's possible that building that feature for the one client can help you fund building additional features for the greater number of clients. But
it's true, but the time it is going to take, right? You can't put a price on the time and the opportunity cost.
right.
It is going to take you a month to build that product. What else could you have been doing in that time, right? So I'm always looking at that and saying, okay, if I say yes to this product, product request, what am I saying no to?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always looking at it from those two sides because it's almost dualism. You'll always have something that's contradictory. So you say yes to something, there's going to be an equal no to something else, right?
Definitely. Yeah, no, this is really great advice. Really, really wonderful, kind of philosophical, but also very practical, I think, on the other hand. So, one final question for you, I guess, is what are you most excited right now about, whether it's with CaseEasy specifically or maybe Canadian immigration tech more generally?
Well, with CaseEasy, I'm just happy about the products that we're going to be launching over the next few weeks. Q4 for us is when we actually focus on getting all the different product ideas that we weren't able to get out over the rest of the year. So we focus on building and releasing a lot more features. There's one in particular, which is probably one you were alluding to, I'm not sure, that we're working on now. That's it's our electronic signature platform. So that's something I'm super excited about because it's going to help immigration practitioners be able to sign in their browsers on their mobile devices. So that's something that we're rolling out pretty soon, and that's very exciting for me.
And so that's e-signatures in order for people to just go right in the platform.
Yep.
And is that connected to CaseEasy or
it's going to be a subsidiary, and we'll bake integrations in the platforms for them to speak to each other. But it had to be a separate product because we do intend on allowing other verticals to utilize the feature.
Got it.
The software. Yeah.
That's really exciting. We did have one more question come in from Josh Shacknow, a fellow Canadian immigration tech entrepreneur. How have professionals been open to and welcoming of your tech for this space? Professionals being whether immigration lawyers or consultants. Are they open to this? How do they feel about it in general?
Well, they're excited. As I mentioned before, they didn't really have any more alternatives. When we do demos and during the demos, we get a lot of wows. Wow, you guys built all of this, right? So persons are really excited to know that we have a turnkey solution. You can literally get your practicing license today and get started, get your clients, get payments, communicate online, and do all of this out the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before you'd have to spend a lot of time signing up for this system, that system, but it's just one platform now. So we're really making it easy for persons to get started.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's great. And I'm not surprised at all. I mean, for immigration practitioners to see cool tech is it should be wow, because this is not the most cutting edge industry generally speaking. But I think folks like you and others just are trying to build up the standards of what practitioners should expect, frankly, from technology that they get. That's super exciting. So I'm really, really pumped for your growth and really pumped for, not just CaseEasy, but of course, immigration in Canada in general.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of end on a more of kind of a fun question. And I'm curious, do you miss, now that you haven't been able to travel, or can you travel? I was going to ask, do you miss Jamaica?
Oh, I miss Jamaica every day. That's where all my family is, right? And I get the nicest food, the nicest weather in Jamaica. So of course, yeah, I can travel, and I'll do so as soon as I can. So yeah, so that's definitely something in the making. But definitely, I miss Jamaica. Before you ask your other question, I always like to add value, right?
Sure.
And I'm reading some good books now. Probably your audience could get this. I'm not sure. Can you see? Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits. Yeah, that's by
James Clear.
James Clear.
Right, it's a super useful book. It helps you to create good habits and to stick to tasks. And another one that I rely on, it's almost like the Bible for entrepreneurs. It's Blue Ocean Strategy. Right, so this shows you literally a blueprint as to how you go into an industry and to add significant value and to grow a company. So these are good books that I recommend.
Love it. Wow, that's huge. I've never, we haven't had any guests recommended books yet, so maybe this is something we should start. Well, Orane, thank you. This was so awesome. Really loved hearing about everything you've built so far in your journey and everything you're doing for the Canadian immigration space, and just really excited. I'm excited to see the growth of the industry outside of the U.S. And then, hopefully we'll get outside of North America as well. Canada's, there's so much happening. Let's have more growth.
Okay.
So thank you for sharing your story and for sharing your tips and spending your time.
Thank you, Roman.
Wow, what an episode. And 2 book recommendations that I hope you all check out. The Blue Ocean Strategy and Atomic Habits. So check them out. Thank you all so much for joining, for spending your Friday afternoon or whenever you're listening to this or watching this. And stay tuned for more episodes of the GMI Rocket Show. Immigration, tech, and marketing. We're just getting started, baby. Cheers.